The distress signal arrived on Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Array at 3:42 UTC. It repeated on all frequencies, a mathematical pattern that required no translation to understand its urgency. Technicians at the station watched in silence as the alien message played across their screens. This was no random cosmic noise. It was deliberate, structured, and desperate. Within hours, the highest members of Earth's government gathered in the underground chambers of the United Earth Defense Council. Director Kang stood at the front of the room, his face illuminated by the blue glow of holographic displays. "They're calling themselves the Veltrani," he said, gesturing to the projection of an alien vessel. Its design was unlike anything humans had created. Smooth curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal, with propulsion systems that defied Earth's current understanding of physics. Their civilization spans 14 star systems, or it did, until the Spherith Dominion began systematically destroying their worlds. The room filled with murmurs. Humanity had only established 3 colonies beyond their solar system, and even those were fragile outposts requiring constant support from Earth. Admiral Jun Park stepped closer to the display. At 62, his hair had gone completely white, and deep lines marked his face from decades of military service. He studied the projections with narrowed eyes. "And they're asking us for help. A species that has traveled between stars for millennia is asking humans for military assistance." His voice carried the weight of skepticism earned through years of command. "Their fleet has been decimated," Kang replied. He swiped his hand through the air, changing the display to show what appeared to be a massive battle. Burning ships, debris fields, and weapons fire that dwarfed anything in Earth's arsenal. They detected our transmissions, tracked our technological evolution. "They're desperate." Park sat back in his chair. "We can barely defend our own colonies in the Ta City system. What do they expect us to do against an enemy that's defeating a far more advanced civilization?" The room grew quiet. Earth's military leaders looked at one another, the unspoken thought hanging in the air. If these advanced aliens couldn't defeat this enemy, what chance did humans have? From the corner of the room, Admiral Yuna Kim cleared her throat. Unlike most of the officers present, she wore an older uniform style with faded insignia. She was commander of Earth's reserve fleet, outdated vessels kept operational after being replaced by newer models. "If I may, Director," she said, her voice steady and confident, "perhaps we can offer limited assistance." Park turned to look at her, his expression somewhere between amusement and pity. "With what?" "Your museum pieces." Several officers chuckled, but Kim didn't flinch. 12 fully operational warships, she corrected him, her voice level despite the insult. "Crewed by veterans who know those systems better than anyone alive." Director Kang looked interested. "Go on, Admiral." Kim stood and walked to the display. "The Veltrani have technology beyond our understanding, yes. But that means the Spherith are also fighting with weapons and strategies we know nothing about. My fleet may be outdated by our standards, but they are completely unknown to this enemy. Sometimes the oldest knife cuts the deepest." "You're suggesting we send obsolete ships against an enemy that's defeating a far superior force?" Park asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting we offer what we can," Kim replied. "And what we can spare without risking our home defenses is my fleet." The debate lasted for hours that day and continued for 3 more days. Military analysts ran simulations, politicians argued about interstellar relations, and scientists pored over the limited data from the Veltrani message. In a private meeting on the 2nd day, Park confronted Kim in the hallway outside the council chamber. "This is suicide, Yuna," he said, using her first name as they had known each other for decades. "We send your ships out there. They'll be destroyed in the first engagement." Kim smiled slightly. "Maybe. Or maybe not. The Veltrani and Spherith have been fighting each other for centuries. They understand each other's capabilities. We might be the unknown factor that changes the equation." "Is this about proving the worth of your fleet?" Park asked sharply. "Some kind of last glory for ships headed to the scrapyard?" "This is about helping those who asked for it," Kim replied firmly. Something I thought we both swore an oath to do. On the third day, the council voted 7-6 in favor of intervention, with a critical stipulation. Earth would send only Kim's reserve fleet, keeping their primary defenses intact. As the meeting ended, officers filed out of the chamber. Kim gathered her datapad and prepared to leave. She had 12 ships to prepare, thousands of crew members to brief, and barely enough time to make it happen. Park caught up with her at the door. His expression was grim. "You realize what they've done, don't you?" he asked quietly. "They've given you just enough rope to hang yourself. If you fail, they'll say they never expected success. If by some miracle you succeed, they'll take the credit for making the decision." Kim looked at him for a long moment. They had trained together as young officers, competed for promotions, and occasionally even worked well together. She knew he wasn't being cruel, just practical, as he had always been. Or perhaps, Kim replied with a slight smile, just enough to tie a knot and hold on. She walked past him, her mind already turning to the enormous task ahead. Within hours, she would need to contact her captains, begin retrofitting her vessels for deep space travel, and prepare humanity's first interstellar military expedition. The Veltrani had asked for humanity's help. They were about to receive Earth's oldest ships, commanded by its most experienced officers, a fleet considered obsolete at home, but perhaps exactly what was needed among the stars. Captain Tai of the EDF Resilient stared at the navigational display, checking the fleet's position for the 5th time that hour. The stars on the screen seemed to mock him, tiny points of light in the vast emptiness they traveled through. 3 weeks into their journey to Veltrani space, and the 12-ship fleet maintained perfect formation, as if compensating for their outdated hulls with flawless precision. Tai rubbed his tired eyes. Sleep had become a luxury since they left Earth's solar system. The Resilient, like all ships in the reserve fleet, wasn't designed for such long journeys. The engines hummed at a higher pitch than normal, working harder than they had in years. "Captain," called Lieutenant Hannah from her communication station. Her voice broke the quiet hum of the bridge. "Admiral Kim is requesting all senior officers for briefing in 1 hour." Ta nodded, not surprised. The Admiral had been holding daily briefings since they entered faster-than-light travel. "Inform Commander Jiwoo and Chief Engineer Do-Yun." "Yes, sir." Hannah turned back to her console, her fingers moving quickly across the outdated interface. Tai stood and stretched his back. At 48, he was younger than most captains in the reserve fleet, but old enough to feel the strain of command. He walked across the bridge, noting how each crew member focused intently on their tasks. They all knew what was at stake. An hour later, Tai docked his shuttle at the flagship EDF Steadfast. The briefing room was cramped by modern standards. Earth's newer vessels had spacious command centers with advanced holographic systems. Here, officers crowded around a simple table with a projection unit that occasionally flickered. Admiral Kim stood before a stellar map, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Despite being in her 60s, she stood straight-backed and alert. Captains and senior officers from all 12 ships filled the room, some standing against the walls. "Thank you for coming," Kim began, her voice clear and steady. "New intelligence from the Veltrani has arrived via quantum relay. The Sverith have reached their sanctuary world of Lyris IV. Over 3 million refugees are stationed there." A murmur ran through the room. Tai exchanged glances with Commander Jiwoo, who had served with him for 7 years. 3 million civilians. The stakes had just gotten much higher. Engineer Do-Yun raised his hand. Unlike most of the military personnel, he wore the plain uniform of the technical corps. His expertise with the fleet's aging systems had earned him respect despite his civilian status. "Admiral, have we received any technical specifications on Sverith weaponry?" Do-Yun asked. "I've been working on modifying our shield harmonics, but I'm flying blind." Kim nodded, gesturing to a data projection that appeared above the table. Strange symbols and diagrams flickered into view, clearly of alien origin. The Veltrani have provided what they can, Kim replied. Their technology is based on quantum field manipulation, something our scientists barely understand. They seem particularly vulnerable to our standard kinetic weapons, but their shielding can withstand extraordinary energy outputs. Tai studied the projections. The Sphyrith vessels looked like dark, angular machines compared to the flowing designs of the Veltrani ships. Their weapons emitted energy signatures unlike anything human science had documented. Security Chief Minho leaned forward from his position near the wall. His face bore a scar from an old boarding action near Mars, and his voice carried the weight of experience. Man, with respect, my team consists of 40 personnel. If we're boarding enemy vessels, we fight with what we have, Chief, Kim interrupted firmly. Her expression softened slightly as she continued. The Veltrani ambassador will rendezvous with us at the edge of their territory in 2 days. I suggest we all prepare for a cultural introduction unlike any in human history. The briefing continued for another hour, with tactical plans discussed and resource allocations confirmed. When it ended, officers filed out to return to their ships. Ta found himself walking slowly, his mind heavy with what they were heading toward. In the officers' mess aboard the Steadfast, Ta spotted Engineer Doyan sitting alone at a corner table. The engineer stared at technical schematics displayed on his tablet, so focused he didn't notice the captain approach. "Mind if I join you?" Tai asked. Doyan looked up, surprised. "Of course, Captain. Please." Tai sat across from him, noting the complex diagrams on the screen. "Trouble with the engines?" Doyan shook his head. "No, not exactly." He hesitated, then turned the tablet so Tai could see better. "I'm reviewing our electromagnetic systems. They're 30 years out of date compared to our main fleet. That bothers you?" Tai asked, reaching for a cup of the synthetic coffee that was standard on long voyages. "Actually," Doyan said thoughtfully, his finger tracing a circuit path on the screen, "I'm wondering if it might matter more than we think." Tai raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Doyan leaned forward, his voice lowering even though no one sat near them. "The Veltrani and Sphyrith both use quantum field manipulation for their technology. Our ships still rely on electromagnetic systems for most functions, technology they abandoned centuries ago, according to the briefing materials. And," Ta prompted, intrigued by the engineer's intensity, "what if they've forgotten about electromagnetic interference? What if their advanced shielding doesn't account for something as simple as an E-impulse?" Ta considered this. "You think our outdated systems might actually give us an advantage?" "It's just a theory," Doyan admitted. "But in engineering, sometimes old solutions work when new ones fail. The Veltrani have been fighting the Sphyrith for decades using similar technology. Maybe what they need is something completely different." Ta nodded slowly. "Document your theory. I'll make sure Admiral Kim sees it before we rendezvous with the Veltrani." As Tai left the mess hall, he looked through a viewport at the stars streaking by. 12 outdated ships traveling to fight an enemy that had decimated a far more advanced civilization. The odds seemed impossible. Yet something about Doyan's theory stirred hope in him. Perhaps their very obsolescence might prove to be their greatest asset. After all, humans had always excelled at finding unexpected solutions to impossible problems. 2 days later, as the fleet approached the rendezvous point, Ta stood on his bridge watching the sensor displays. Soon, they would meet their first alien species, and shortly after that, they would face an enemy unlike any humanity had encountered before. He was ready. His ship was ready. And just maybe, their outdated technology would prove to be exactly what the galaxy needed. The sanctuary world of Lyris IV hung in space like a blue-green jewel, partially obscured by the massive Sphyrith warships in orbit. From the bridge of the Resilient, Captain Ta watched as brilliant energy beams lanced from the alien vessels toward the planet's surface. Each impact created flashes of light visible even from space. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Hanna at the communication station. "They're bombarding civilian areas." Tay's jaw tightened. The Veltrani ambassador had briefed them on what to expect, but seeing it firsthand was different. The Sverith ships were enormous, each one at least 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. Their dark, angular hulls absorbed starlight rather than reflecting it, making them look like moving shadows against the stars. "All ships report ready for engagement, Captain," Commander Juwu said from his tactical station. Before Tai could respond, Admiral Kim's voice came through on the fleet-wide channel. "Defensive positions," she ordered. "Squadrons 1 and 2, move to intercept the destroyer-class vessels. Squadron 3, maintain distance and prepare for emergency extraction." The human ships, already small compared to standard military vessels back on Earth, seemed like toys next to the Sverith behemoths. The Resilient led Squadron 2, 4 ships moving in tight formation toward the right flank of the Sverith fleet. "Weapons hot," Tai ordered. "Shield generators at maximum." On the main view screen, he could see the other human vessels taking position. The plan was simple: distract the Sverith long enough for the Veltrani evacuation ships to launch from the surface. As they moved into formation, a massive energy burst erupted from the Lid Sverith vessel. The blast wasn't directed at any specific target. It spread outward like a wave. "Evasive maneuvers," shouted Tai, gripping his command chair. The Resilience pilot responded instantly, diving the ship beneath the worst of the energy wave. Still, the vessel shuddered violently as the edge of the blast passed nearby. Warning lights flashed across control panels, but the shields held, barely. "Shields at 63%, reported Juwu. "One hit like that would have broken through completely." Through the comm, Admiral Kim's voice sounded calm despite the situation. "Return fire. All vessels, conventional kinetic rounds only. Conserve energy weapons." Tai relayed the order. Across his squadron, rail guns and missile batteries opened up. The outdated weapons seemed primitive compared to the Sverith energy weapons, but they followed orders. Most shots dissipated harmlessly against the Sverith shields, creating ripples of light across their invisible barriers. But some, particularly the dense metal slugs from the railguns, penetrated, causing visible damage to the alien hulls. "They're turning to engage," reported Lieutenant Hana, her eyes fixed on her sensor readings. "Reading energy buildup in." Her words were cut off as the ship rocked violently, throwing several crew members from their stations. Emergency klaxons blared, and red warning lights bathed the bridge in an ominous glow. "Deck 7 breached," reported Commander Juwu, his fingers flying across his console. "Sealing compartments." Tai opened a ship-wide channel. "Damage control teams to Deck 7. Medical prepare for casualties." Across the battlefield, the human fleet was taking heavy damage. The EDF Dauntless exploded in a brilliant flash as a Sverith beam cut it in half. 2 other ships drifted, their engines disabled. "Admiral." Engineer Do-Yun's voice cut through the comm channels, excitement breaking through his usually calm demeanor. "I'm detecting fluctuations in their shield matrix whenever we fire our old E-impulse drives." Ta looked at his tactical display. Do-Yun was right. There was a momentary weakening in the Sverith shields when the human ships used their emergency thrusters, which generated strong electromagnetic pulses as a side effect. Before they could capitalize on this discovery, the flagship Steadfast took a direct hit to its command section. The beam cut through the ship's forward section like a knife. "Steadfast is hit," Juwu reported. "Heavy damage to command deck." After a tense moment of silence, Admiral Kim's voice came through, strained and interrupted by static. "This is Admiral Kim. Captain Tai, you have fleet command. I'm transferring all tactical data." "Acknowledged," Tai responded grimly, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. He took a deep breath and made his decision. "All vessels, maximize EM field output. Do-Yun, reroute all non-essential power to the electromagnetic systems." "Sir." Juwu looked confused. "That will drain power from weapons and shields." "Do it," Tai ordered. Focus fire on the vessel that hit the Steadfast. Engineer Doyun's voice came through again. Captain, if we reverse the polarity on our shield generators, we can create an Ion impulse strong enough to potentially disrupt their entire targeting system. Make it happen, Tai ordered. The battle shifted. Human ships now maneuvered in ways that made no sense by conventional tactics, rushing close to Seraph vessels, activating emergency thrusters, and firing only their rail guns and physical projectiles. With each electromagnetic pulse, the alien shields flickered momentarily. In those brief windows of vulnerability, human weapons found their marks. A smaller Seraph vessel lost engine control after a barrage of kinetic rounds punctured its propulsion system. Another suffered visible damage to its weapons array. But the human fleet was taking losses too. 3 ships were completely destroyed, their crews lost. 3 others suffered severe damage, limping at the edges of the battle. After 40 minutes of intense fighting, Tai made the hardest decision of his career. All vessels, prepare for retreat. Formation Delta. Cover the damaged ships. The human fleet began to pull back, maintaining their electromagnetic interference to discourage pursuit. To Tai's relief, the Sverith seemed more interested in maintaining their bombardment of the planet than chasing the small human ships. As they retreated to a safe distance, Tai received a report that changed everything. Captain, said Security Chief Minho over the comm. During the fighting, we managed to capture an intact Sverith drone. It was disabled by the Ion impulse but otherwise undamaged. Ta looked at the view screen, where the Sverith fleet still orbited Lyris IV. They had lost 5 ships and suffered heavy damage to 3 others. By any military standard, it was a defeat. But they had discovered a weakness in Sverith defenses, one the Veltrani had never found in centuries of conflict, and they had captured technology that might reveal more secrets. Get that drone to Engineer Doyun immediately, Tai ordered, and check on Admiral Kim's condition. As the battered human fleet limped away to regroup, Ta watched the blue-green world growing smaller on the view screen. They would be back, and next time, they would be ready. You want to do what? Captain Ta stared at Engineer Doyun and Security Chief Minho, who had spread technical diagrams across the conference table. 3 days had passed since their retreat from Lyris IV, and the human fleet had gathered in a remote asteroid field to repair and regroup. Doyun pointed to a section of the diagram, showing the communication systems of the Resilient. Convert our communication arrays into massive Ion impulse generators, he explained, his eyes bright with excitement. I studied the captured drone. The Sverith neural networks are vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. Ta looked skeptical. Our communication systems are essential for coordination. Without them, we'll maintain short-range capabilities, Doyun assured him. But the long-range arrays can be modified to emit pulses that will disrupt their shields and guidance systems. Minho leaned forward, his scared face intense. And while their systems are disrupted, he continued, my teams can board using the old maintenance airlocks. Their defenses focus on energy weapons, not physical intrusion. Tai stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the other ships of the fleet undergoing repairs. You're suggesting we turn our warships into electronic warfare platforms and then board alien vessels that outmass us 10 to 1. Yes, both men said simultaneously. Tai was quiet for a moment. Admiral Kim will need to approve this. She already has, said a voice from the doorway. Admiral Kim entered, moving slowly. Her right arm was in a sling, and a healing cut ran across her forehead. I've reviewed their proposal. It's our best option. Over the next 2 weeks, the human fleet underwent a transformation. Engineers worked around the clock, converting communication systems and repurposing power generators. Every ship became a specialized electronic warfare platform. In the cargo bay of the Resilient, Security Chief Minho drilled his boarding teams relentlessly. They practiced using mechanical cutting tools and basic projectile weapons, technology considered obsolete on Earth, but ideal for an environment where energy weapons might trigger alien defense systems. Again, Minho shouted as his team simulated breaching an airlock. The Sverith won't give you a second chance. Admiral Kim, recovering from her injuries, monitored the progress from the command center they had established on an asteroid base. She approved every modification, sometimes adding suggestions of her own. "We're not fighting the way Earth taught us to fight," she told her officers. "We're creating a new doctrine based on what works against this enemy." The Veltrani observed these changes with increasing interest. Their ambassador, Laren, had initially been dismissive of the human vessels. Now the tall, silver-skinned alien spent hours with Engineer Doyan, watching as he modified the captured Sirith drone to test different electromagnetic frequencies. "Your species' approach is unexpected," Laren admitted one day, watching as Doyan successfully disabled the drone's neural network with a specific EM pulse. "We abandoned electromagnetic technology centuries ago. It never occurred to us that the Sverith would lack defenses against it." Doyan smiled as he reset the drone for another test. "Sometimes the oldest tools are the most effective," he replied, "especially when your enemy has forgotten they exist." Laren tilted his elongated head. "Perhaps we have much to learn from each other." "I believe we do," Doyan agreed. "Your quantum technology combined with our electromagnetic systems might create something neither of us could develop alone." Their first coordinated strike came 3 weeks after the battle at Lyris IV. Intelligence from Veltrani scouts identified a Sverith supply convoy moving through a nearby star system. It was the perfect opportunity to test their new approach. 3 human ships, the Resilient, the Dauntless II, named after the vessel lost in the previous battle, and the Intrepid, approached the convoy. They maintained radio silence, using only light signals to coordinate. "All ships in position," reported Lieutenant Hanna. "M systems charged and ready." Captain Ta nodded. "Begin broadcast." All 3 ships activated their modified communication arrays simultaneously, broadcasting EM interference at the exact frequency Doyan had determined would affect Sverith systems. The effect was immediate. The Sverith vessels faltered, their running lights flickering and their movements becoming erratic. Their automated defense systems, designed to track energy weapons, went temporarily offline. Boarding teams, launch, TAD ordered. From each human ship, small shuttles emerged, carrying Minho's security teams. They approached the disoriented Sverith vessels carefully, targeting the maintenance airlocks that Doyan had identified from studying the drone. Using mechanical cutting tools instead of energy-based weapons, they breached the hulls. Once inside, they moved quickly, planting simple explosive devices at key junction points and disabling propulsion systems. 2 hours later, the human ships retreated, leaving behind 3 disabled Sverith supply vessels. No human lives were lost. Word spread quickly through the Veltrani refugee fleet. The primitive humans had achieved what their advanced technology could not. More joint operations followed, each more successful than the last. With each victory, the Human-Veltrani alliance grew stronger. Veltrani engineers began incorporating electromagnetic shielding into their designs, something they had abandoned centuries before. Human technicians learned the basics of quantum field manipulation from their alien allies. Admiral Kim established a formal training program, where human and Veltrani crews learned to work together. "We fight as one force now," she told them. 2 species, united against a common enemy. The Sverith, however, began to adapt. Their attacks became more cautious, their formations more defensive. They developed crude shielding against electromagnetic interference, though it remained a vulnerability. After 2 months of successful guerrilla operations, Captain Tai received an urgent summons to Admiral Kim's command center. When he arrived, he found the Admiral studying a holographic map with Ambassador Laren. "The Sverith have noticed our strategy," Kim said without preamble. "A massive battle group has changed course. They're heading directly for our position." A hologram showed dozens of Sverith warships, more than the humans and Veltrani had faced combined in all previous engagements. "They're sending everything they have," Admiral Kim told the assembled officers, her face grim but determined. This will be their attempt to crush us completely. Tai studied the projection. How much time do we have? 3 days at most, Laren replied. We must prepare. As the meeting ended and officers rushed to their assignments, Do-yeon caught up with Tai in the corridor. Captain, he said quietly, I've been working on something new. A way to amplify our EM emissions exponentially. It might be our only chance against such numbers. Ta nodded. Show me. Together, they walked toward the engineering bay, where humanity's obsolete technology might once again become their greatest hope. The 7 remaining ships of Earth's reserve fleet formed a tight defensive perimeter around Lyris IV. The blue-green planet rotated slowly behind them, its oceans reflecting distant starlight. 3 million Veltrani refugees waited on the surface, along with the remaining artifacts of their once proud civilization. On the bridge of the Resilient, Captain Ta checked his tactical display one last time. The ships had been positioned according to Do-yeon's calculations, creating overlapping fields of electromagnetic coverage. It was a formation no military academy on Earth would have taught. But Earth had never faced an enemy like the Stirith. The Sverith battle group will arrive in 12 minutes, announced Lieutenant Hannah from her station. Despite the tension, her voice remained steady. Long-range sensors confirmed 37 vessels, including their command ship. Captain Ta looked across the bridge to where Admiral Kim stood. Her injuries from the previous battle had healed, though she still moved with a slight stiffness. Are we ready? Kim nodded, her expression calm despite the overwhelming odds they faced. As ready as we'll ever be. She stepped forward and opened the fleet-wide channel that would reach every human ship. This is Admiral Kim. Today we stand not just for Earth, but for another species that has asked for our help. We may be considered obsolete by our own people, but today we will show the galaxy what humanity's weakest fleet can do. Across the bridge, crew members stood straighter at her words. They had come light years from home in ships others had deemed unworthy, yet they had accomplished what no one thought possible. Engineer Do-yeon's voice came over the comm from his position in engineering. M generators at 200% capacity. They won't last more than 20 minutes at this output. They won't need to, Kim replied with quiet confidence. The minutes passed in tense silence. Crew members checked and rechecked systems. Security teams under Chief Minho prepared for possible boarding actions. The Veltrani ships, positioned farther back, maintained their defensive stance around the planet. Then space itself seemed to ripple. The Sverith appeared from hyperspace, 37 warships arranged in an attack formation that resembled a spear point. Their lead vessel, twice the size of any the humans had yet encountered, moved to the center. Its dark hull absorbed starlight, making it look like a hole in space itself. That's their command ship, Kim said, pointing to the massive vessel. All vessels, implement Operation Thunderclap. The human fleet responded immediately. Following the rehearsed plan, the ships scattered, each one activating its modified EM generators. The space between them filled with overlapping electromagnetic fields, invisible to the eye, but devastating to the Sverith systems. On the tactical display, Ta watched as the Sverith formation slowed, their advance becoming more cautious as they detected the interference. But they pushed forward nonetheless, their weapons charging. The first energy beams lanced out from the Sverith vessels, one striking the EDF Intrepid directly. Despite its reinforced shielding, the smaller human ship couldn't withstand such power. Its shields failed in a cascade of blue energy, its hull rupturing. Intrepid is down, reported Commander Juu, his voice tight. 147 crew members. No sign of escape pods. Ta felt the loss like a physical blow, but there was no time to mourn. The battle plan depended on precise timing and positioning. The Sverith flagship is entering the center of our formation, Juu continued. Kim nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Now, she ordered. All 6 remaining human vessels activated their emergency drives simultaneously. The maneuver looked like retreat to outside observers, but it was actually the trigger for Do-yeon's modified system. The combined effect created a massive electromagnetic pulse at precisely the frequency he had calculated from the captured drone. The effect was immediate and far more dramatic than they had dared hope. The Sverith flagship's lights flickered and died, its weapon ports closing as emergency systems failed. Then, inexplicably, the effect spread to the surrounding vessels like a wave. Their network. Do-Yun shouted over the comm, his voice cracking with excitement. They're all connected through the flagship's neural matrix. One by one, the Sverith ships went dark, drifting helplessly in space. The mighty armada that had terrorized the Veltrani for decades floated powerless, caught in a trap designed by a human engineer using technology considered obsolete on Earth. All security teams, launch, ordered Admiral Kim. Board the command vessel first, then fan out to the others. Boarding shuttles launched from the human ships, carrying Minho's teams to the paralyzed Sirith vessels. Using the tactics they had practiced, they breached the hulls using mechanical tools and moved through the alien corridors with practiced efficiency. 3 hours later, Captain Ta stood on the bridge of the Resilient, watching as Veltrani ships surrounded the disabled Stirith fleet. The operation had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. 35 of the 37 Stirith vessels had been captured intact. Only 2 had managed to self-destruct before boarding teams reached their control centers. The Veltrani are adapting our EM technology to their vessels, said Engineer Do-Yun, entering the bridge. He looked exhausted but triumphant. They're already planning to reclaim their outer colonies. Admiral Kim entered moments later. The weariness in her face couldn't hide her pride as she looked at her crew. I just received a transmission from Earth. They're sending the main fleet, equipped with our EM modifications. So the weakest fleet just changed the course of an interstellar war, Ta said quietly. Kim smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling. Not the weakest, just different. Sometimes that's all it takes. From the viewport, they watched as Veltrani ships towed the Stirith vessels away. The greatest threat to their civilization, neutralized not by overwhelming force, but by outdated technology and the creativity of those who mastered it. What happens now? Asked Ta. Kim looked out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. Now, she said, we show the galaxy what happens when you ask humans for help, even when you only get their weakest response. On the planet below, the Veltrani celebrated their first major victory in decades. In engineering, Do-Yun and his team were already designing new systems that combined human and Veltrani technology. And on Earth, military strategists were rewriting their doctrines based on the lessons from a fleet they had nearly scrapped. The reserve fleet's journey had begun with a desperate plea from an alien species. It ended with humanity taking its first true steps onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors or saviors, but as innovators who found strength in what others saw as weakness. The end.